All right, people, take a deep breath in. Good, bad, or ugly. It's 2023, and I'm coming at you strong. I told you this year would be filled with surprises. And this year, at the beginning, right off the bat, let's keep it real, people. I'm bringing on a guest that probably I wouldn't have been able to get in till June, but somebody got laryngitis. They'll be fine, but they just can't talk. They'll be fine. So the surprise is, and if I get her last name wrong, she will let us know, but she says it so much more beautifully. Dr. Marie Lesaicherre. Is that cool? Wait, don't tell me yet. PhD, MBA, is the founder and oh my God, not another one, CEO of Akesa app. Let's just go with that. Akesa Health. That's it. Is that right? Just shake your head like, yeah, I'm good. Okay. A startup offering a self-guided therapy app, helping people transform anxiety and distress into resilience. No, my audience doesn't have any of that, do we? She is a global entrepreneurial executive with 18 years experience launching tech businesses for General Electric and startups in the US, Asia, Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. Ooh, she's been around a lot. Holds a PhD in chemical biology for the National University of Singapore. Okay. In an executive MBA, she must get bored, Columbia Business School, and the London Business School. Welcome. Oh my God, Marie, what the heck? It's been a great life. But before we get into that, what's your one word that best describes your past 30 days, whatever it is, good, bad, or ugly, and why?
So first of all, thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here. It's a great way to start the year. The word that comes to mind would be reflection. I've been spending the last few weeks doing a lot of reflection over the past year and what's coming. And so spending time alone, thinking about things, silence as well. Yeah.
Really? Did you do any silent meditation?
No, but I switched off from calls during Christmas and the New Year. I spent a lot of time journaling and going for long walks. And so, yeah, journaling is kind of my replacement. I know it's not the same, but journaling for me is my meditation. Yeah.
Okay, well, I just want you to tell them I did not plan for you to say that, nor did we talk about that. Because, you know, that's what I do for a living. I write journals and make journals for people, to guided journals. So that is the way, not that I don't meditate when I'm biking, but that is the way I reflect too. Yeah, I made my livelihood out of doing that with my health. And you didn't know that, did you?
I didn't know. You know, I did a little bit of research on your podcast, but very, very little. So that's so interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So besides owning health clubs, my books that I wrote are Train Your Head and Your Body Will Follow, was all in how do you get people to journal even for 1 minute to 3 minutes a day. So I wrote guidebooks, reset books, and just recently a journal for kids, 6 to 12 years old, which the adults are now using, not the kids. Well, the kids too, but.
It's like the doodling thing, right? I think it started for the kids, but now everybody loves to doodle, right? And feels those coloring books.
Yeah, doodle. I call it scribble, scrabble, brain dream, but whatever. Okay, so I did reach out, even though this was last minute, to my peeps and said, all right, what are some questions you have for Marie? And I showed them your background. And everybody's either Sally or Billy Bob. And we'll keep them anonymous. But the biggest question they have is they really are fascinated by this journey because you've been all over the place and then circled back into an app for mental health with being in, I mean, come on. I mean, this is huge companies that you worked with in the tech business area. Tell us just a teeny bit of that journey.
So I've always been very curious. I grew up on a farm, and I think when I was very young, my father didn't travel, and I've always wanted to see the world. And so I really wanted to understand life and understand people, and a lot of opportunities came. And I'm grateful for those. And I think I was a little bit gung-ho and fearless. And so I seized a lot of opportunities that came my way. And a lot of those moves were not premeditated, actually. You know, I was like, I had a hint, I wanted to see the word, but opportunities came and I was like, sure, I'm going to go.
Ah, so you have that, let's just leap of faith attitude, like trusting your gut instincts and like, hey, let's just go for it. Sounds good to me.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm a very big gut person. And in startup, we say you start flying while you're still building the plane. And it's exactly me. I used to be, very rational, wants to have all the answer, but now I'm like, I trust the process. I'm like, it's okay, let's start going and we'll figure out some of the details along the way, Yeah.
Okay, so here you are. You're in big industry, working for major players. What was the deciding moment? Okay, I'm getting the heck out of here.
So GE was great when I started, right? I was in China, I was young, and I was offered a lot of opportunities, a lot of training, and so I worked for them in China, I worked for them in San Diego, and then I relocated to Boston, worked for another division, a lot more stable, not growing so much. And I was like, I'm getting bored, I'm getting unchallenged here. It's not the GE I knew. And the division was sold off and they're like, we're going to close it off. And I could have stayed in and looked for something else in there, but I was like, it's time to go. So I was like, I'd been thinking about it. The plug was kind of pulled for me. And so I left.
Okay, so it's not the GE originally. You weren't being challenged and you're like, there's got to be more. All right. Well, then let's back up to when I was reading your background. You talked a lot about childhood traumas and that when you were in business, you didn't have to think about it. You were just ignoring them, running from them, not dealing with them.
Correct.
But then was it because you slowed things down or did you go to therapy first? So that's what I wasn't sure of. Like, when did you start like going, oh crap, this trauma is within me and I can't run from it anymore?
So it happened in different stages. So 2010. So I had been told, go see a therapist, talk a lot about the loss of your mother. I grew up in a family which it wasn't a norm 40 years ago. It's like therapy is for losers, right? It's like, why can't you fix your problem on your own? And I believed it because everybody told me that. I was like, I can't get a PhD. Damn, why can't I fix my own issues? So for 30 years, I was like, I'm never going to see a therapist. And then I was living in Boston. I had a very close friend who was really smart and I really trusted her and respected her. And she was like, it's kind of time, life is kind of boring right now, no crisis, work is under control, maybe it's the time to start seeing a therapist. So I started a therapy, but I was like, I don't have any issue, right? No trust issue, no abandonment issues, I just want to rationally understand what's the impact of losing a mother when you're very young on a woman, I was like, I just want to understand. I just want to, something very analytical. And then it started opening Pandora's box. I realized I had not grieved any of the people I lost. And so it started going downhill. On one hand, it started awakening a lot of fears and trauma. And then about a year and a half later, my nephew, who is very close to me, was 17 at the time, was in a little train and the train derailed. A couple of people died. He was in the ER for weeks. And that was really the shock, seeing someone so close in the ER. I mean, we see it on TV all the time, but when you are in the ER and someone is like in coma, it shakes you. And so for 1 year, I managed to, follow along in business school, but eventually everything came back crashing. That was really the crack. It hit me so strongly. My mind was like, a lot of memories started coming back. And yeah.
So I hear this a lot. The side where don't go back. Like, what's the point of going back? Unless it affects you now, don't tell the stories from the past, versus you got to get them out and tell them somehow, somewhere to somebody, or write it down, because they're in you and they're stored in your body, and move forward. So I would love to hear your philosophy on that.
So you need to get them out, but just talking about them is not sufficient. So where mental health comes in right now is talk therapy, just talking about the trauma, is helpful in becoming aware of what happened, because we often forget a lot of it.
Yeah.
But it is not sufficient. And the image I use sometimes is like the ski track. It's one morning, it's beautiful in Colorado, it just, snowed, and you can go anywhere, right? You take one ski track, and the day after you can still take another track, right? You're tracing your own ways. But after a while, if you keep talking about the same thing and repeating the same thing, this track gets entrenched. And so every time you go into therapy and you just talk about what happened, you re-traumatize yourself.
Yep.
And you strengthen those neural networks. So very often it is not sufficient. And this is where additional modalities like EMDR, which I use, can be helpful to not only talk about it, but overcome the trauma and eventually move away from it.
It's funny because this is like perfect timing. I was just writing a paper about this, and it's hard for me because I have friends that are therapists who I feel they do sit there and listen to the same thing over and over again. And so I have to tread lightly. And it just never made sense to me, Marie, even since a kid. Like, you sit there, even not knowing how the brain works, it felt like you're just living in it and repeating it over and over and again, versus what I called, we were talking about before we went on, brain drain, scribble scrabble. Like, get it out, tell it, and then move forward for now. If you reflect back on it, but what's most important is here and where you want to go.
Yeah.
So how do the therapists know, like the ones that you think of and that you go, wow, they're really good at it? How do they know how much for the person to talk about it and when to move them through?
So it's therapies that are trained in trauma healing. So they use additional therapies like EMDR, or now
Okay.
some form of psychedelics as well are extremely powerful for this.
Yeah. Okay. So the other question, that was a big question. I got a lot. I didn't think I would get a lot at the last minute, but it was exactly what you were talking about. You, I don't even know how to explain. I'm looking at what Billy wrote, but basically he felt as he was doing fine, maybe not amazing in his corporate world. And then he started doing a little digging with his therapist, and it opened like Pandora box, and it was so painful. He didn't understand why this was going to be helpful on the other side, and he's still not through the other side. So I understand exactly what he's saying. Like, why do I want to feel all that pain? Is it really going to be worth it? Can I just say that was then and push it down?
Personally, I believe no. It's hard to trust someone if you're not been there. Right? Why would they trust me? They don't know me. But I would say there is light at the end of the tunnel. I strongly believe it. I've been through some very, very, very hard times, but with the proper therapy and the proper therapist, there is light at the end of the tunnel. I am always convinced of this. Always, always, always. And I'm going to be very blunt. It's a choice. Do you want to spend the rest of your life not living fully, or do you want to spend some time that will be hard, but the following years will be beautiful? And I've seen it with people in the family. It took me a very long time to understand this. There are people in the family who are much older, and most probably what goes through their mind is it worth it?
Yeah.
I'm going to die very soon. But for me, when it happened, I was like, I want to get out of this. I still have many years to live, and it not only affects yourself, your health and all of this, but it affects your creativity, because creativity comes from within. And so if you don't open up and release the pain, you don't feel
Mhm.
all those creativity, and love and relationship, and it kind of eats you from within, So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's a trade-off,
Well, normally I don't tell a lot of my personal journey because it's all about you, but I think I'm going to share this little bit. Oh, I think it was 2019. I remember being in a conference in Colorado about business, and the guy said, give me 2 words of what you would like in life in your business in the next few years. And I said, pure joy and freedom. And I start crying because what do you mean? I go, well, I'm very successful. I own health clubs. I exude joy. I'm the person that lifts people up, but I just want it to be pure, not, that I have to fake it a lot of times. He goes, well, you're going to have it. Wouldn't you know, Marie, the universe delivered it in the only way they could. For over 6 months, I had this nerve issue from falling too many times on my mountain bike and ignoring it, that I was in a fetal position, curled up. They didn't know what was wrong. They kept doing exercise. Oh, see, nobody could figure it out. Nobody could figure it out. I mean, they thought it could have been like, I was like, all right, I had a good run. Let's go to the next life. I mean, like because it was like the nerves were coming around my brain and squeezing it to the point I couldn't exercise. Somebody that was in the fitness field. I couldn't do interviews. I couldn't type. I couldn't watch TV. I couldn't write. I couldn't uplift people. My assistant would come to the house and do a lot of it for me while I was like, I couldn't go to the bathroom by myself. I couldn't shower, couldn't drive. Nobody knew this. They thought I was touring and speaking, doing speaking engagements. My mentor, who has the same belief system as me and you, said, oh my, and by the way, lives in Florida, says to me, I'm so glad you're going through this. The universe couldn't deliver it in any other way. You asked for pure joy and freedom. You've been running for this trauma because you were like, I'm happy, I have a great life, kid. But for you to go where you really want to go and have this beautiful life, you have to it's all stored in your body, you have to get it out. I wanted to kill him because nobody else understood. They're like, what is he talking about? Do you know what I mean? Like, this is a gift in the universe. Because I always would figure out a way to mountain bike, way to lift, just ignore it. I was down. And it goes. And when you get it through your body, you will be healed. I go, okay. Well, I would just never meditated, but was listening to silent meditations, talking to the universe, talking to God. And it just poured out of me. I mean, crying, memories. It was excruciating. But when it came all out of my body, that was the only way I could release it. I knew the feeling of pure joy and that I could tap into it no matter what was going on around me. It was a whole different feeling. Not that everybody had, like, that was my experience, like, because I had ignored it for so many years and I'm happy and my life is great. And that was, I think it couldn't have happened any other way. That was my personal journey. But I did not understand what it was. I'm like, I'm happy, I'm joyful. I mean, look at my life. I mean, like, I'm not faking it. But that experience of that, like you said, for what I asked for, I couldn't get there any other way. And now, a couple of years later, it's the weirdest thing of how I can just go, no matter what, I can get into the zone. And if I'm not feeling that pure joy, like, I'm not going to fake it with my friends. I lost friends, by the way, because they were like, no. You're the one we always come to. You're the solution. You're always joyful. I'm like, yeah, I'm a human. I'm not always. Isn't that incredible how that happened for me? And then they found out what it was, the nerves that were pinching. They couldn't see it at first on a spur. And when it pinched, that's what was driving this. And then I went to the physical therapist. She goes, oh, I know what it is. Is that crazy?
I know. And it's, it reminds me of Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. And so he wrote about the journey. And so we are all we are all heroes in life, and it starts, and it's used a lot in the movies, right? You have something that happens in the beginning and the heroes want something, but those crises are opportunities for growth. They happen to us so that, and I read over the holidays, I listened to Phil Stutz's books, the psychologist, and and he talks about the tools, but eventually underneath all of this, what he is alluding to is that those challenges are there for us to discover within ourselves strength we are not aware of. And this is really powerful and really beautiful, I think, is we are a lot more resistant than we think. But it's like when you exercise, you need the weight in order to, build your muscle. If you were pushing against air, we would not build anything. So those challenges are here for us to, look at the past, grow stronger, grow more resilient and more loving, I think.
Yeah. I mean, when you were talking, like, that is like exactly the same thing for me. Like, but I think what you were talking about, I was scared to go there because I was like, I can't handle, I don't have the capacity. That would be too painful to have those memories. But then you realize you do have the capacity and you do have the strength and you do build resilience. And like you said, what's on the other side is so much more beautiful, like, for the small amount of time. And by the way, not everyone has to go be as stubborn as me and be taken, like, everyone has other things. Some people are like, yeah, I'm good. I'm going to therapy now. Like my son, who was in 8th grade, I remember when his friends moved and he lost his friends, he wanted to go talk to someone. And he said to me, I don't see why everyone doesn't understand they could benefit by talking to someone. Like, to me, it just seems that everyone would be happier to talk to a therapist that fit them. Like, he just couldn't understand the stigma. And I think now the young people, I mean, do you think the stigma is still there?
It is still here, yeah. And I think it depends on which communities, launching Akesa, I realized I talked to a lot of people, and without, putting races and all of this, but as a white person, we grew up in a culture where it's a little bit more normal to talk about your emotions and your feelings. But I have Chinese American friends and they're like, I would never talk about stuff with my mother, never. And they've grown up in this culture, and even talking to a therapist is hard because people in our family won't accept it because she's not used to it. African American friends have told me the same thing. We don't do this in our culture. You share it with your close friends and you deal with it and you move on, So I think there is still a lot of stigma, actually. Yeah.
Well, the biggest thing, which is number 4 on my questions, is, okay, I think I would benefit from a therapist, but find me one. And I know what she's saying, meaning that, and I even have this because I refer a lot of my clients to therapists and psychiatrists. The really good ones, you're on a waiting list, or you can't afford them, or your insurance isn't covering them. And so how do you find them? Because I think there's a big shortage of really good ones out there. Unless I'm wrong, I don't know.
You're very right, and everybody's talking about it right now. And I know therapists in New York because they advise the business, and they are like, therapists don't take even waiting list anymore because they don't want to give the hope to someone that 3 months down the road they'd be able to talk to someone. And it's not a question of price anymore. It's, in LA, it's the same thing. Even if you want to pay $450, you can't find someone because they're all taken up. That's the therapy, the pandemic was really hard, right? And was dramatic, but the benefit of the pandemic is that everybody realized that their mental health was important and more fragile than they thought. And so during the pandemic and post-pandemic, everybody wanted to see a therapist, right? And so now we realize, well, there is a shortage of therapists, and we won't have enough therapists for the next few years because it takes time to train them, So there is a shortage of therapists. Simple.
And we realize, hey, we can do virtual. A lot of people don't prefer it, but you can see a therapist no matter where you are. So it made it, okay, give me one. But recently, even the ones I've sent people to, I'm like, well, let's try them. They're like, are you kidding me? And I'm like, you're right, you're right, you're right. And they don't, like you said, have experience. Like, they haven't been doing it, and it's trial and error. So,
And we have to realize that the pandemic was hard for therapists as well. It's like we went to see them, we downloaded all our crap, and they're like, but hey, I'm suffering from the pandemic too. Hey, I need some time. We expect them to work, like 100 hours a week. And they're like, I need my weekend. It's, one thing I realized, it's hard for therapists to hear a lot of trauma, every single day, day after day. And they need time to rest too,
I wasn't sure, I want to talk about your app because I really do. But do you also see clients?
I don't see clients because I'm not a trained therapist. I'm an energy healer. I could do energy healing, but right now I decided to focus completely on the app. Yeah. I'm trained as a coach. I could potentially take clients as, via coaching, but I don't usually take clients right now. Yeah.
Yeah, you got your other focus. All right, we're going to switch gears because I'm very curious about this. When and why did you get the degree? I'm sitting here going, in Singapore. I mean, I need to hear more about that. Chemical biology from the National University of Singapore.
So that was the discovering life, let life unfold. So I started my career, I grew up in France. I was studying chemical engineering in the south of France. And then about a third half of the students would go overseas on exchange program. And long story made short, didn't want to go to UK, too close, had been to Germany. The program in the US was not interesting, very small university. And then there was a new program with Australia. And I was like, oh, this is going to be cool, And then one day the director comes back, and that was many years ago. And, France has some colonies close to Australia. They were doing nuclear testing at the time. And so the director comes back and he was like, oh, Australia is very pissed off about this. They don't want to talk to us anymore. I was like, whoa. And then he was like, but hey, I stopped in Singapore on the way back. There might be an exchange program. Who wants to go? And then I am not kidding. I remember it very well. It was a Wednesday morning, late morning. And then I saw my hand lift itself. I didn't even think about it. I barely knew where Singapore was. And I was like, I'm going to go. And then another chap in the whole amphitheater raised his hand, and some of my classmates were like, "Are you insane?" Some of them told me afterwards, "You're just stupid." And but then the exchange was created, and 6 months later, 9 months later, I landed in Singapore. And then it was just supposed to be 1 year. I got my master down there, and I was like, I want to get a PhD actually, so I stayed and got a PhD.
How long were you there?
6 years.
Is it everything I think it is?
Yes, and it has changed a lot. Singapore, I was there 97 to 2003. It was developed, obviously, but not as developed as it is right now. But it's this beautiful little island, and it's extremely safe, extremely peaceful. And it's a jumping point. You get on a plane and within 2 hours you're all over Southeast Asia. So it was a great place to live, and I had great friends in the university. So it was beautiful. It was the PhD study was hard, but it was a great time. Yeah.
Is there anyone in poverty there?
Actually, there is, because what happened. So Singapore became independent from the UK, I think in the 70s, can't remember the exact date. And so they didn't have a healthcare system and an unemployment system. And so when I was there, you would see actually 70-year-old people cleaning table in the restaurants and everything. And I was very surprised. And they're like, they don't have any retirement system. So they still need to work very late. So I would not call it poverty, but you saw a lot of people, under duress, actually.
Because, we think of all the glamour from the shows. And I was at a networking event, and I did meet people from Singapore, and they were all very wealthy. But then again, they were at a business networking event here. And I'm wondering, is like just everybody, wealthy and filled with joy and love? And did they figure out Nirvana there?
I don't think they've figured out nirvana. It's a very, I mean, kudos for Lee Kuan Yew for what it did, right? Singapore was a little island and he really took it out, but it's also a very mercantile society. You know, at the time they had what they called the 5 C's, your aspiration. So get some cash, get a big car, you know, get a condominium. And then I can't remember the other two, but these were the aspiration of people. So it's still very money focused, you know.
All right, we have to talk about it, and I'm fascinated by this, but let's do a deep dive into the app that you created. And I'm saying here, you're going to help tap into them knowing more of their healing power and transform anxiety and distress. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what a gift. How long did you work on it? When, why? I need details on everything.
So I've been thinking about this for quite some time. I think since the burnout happened in 2012, I got even more interested in mental health, psychology, all of this. So I started reading a lot about it, got trained in various energy healing. And then, so eventually I found EMDR a few years ago. I really got out of the wood. I suffered from PTSD, didn't even know it, and really recovered from it completely. And I was like, you know, the fork happened. I was like, I could move on, right? I could take another big job somewhere and just move on. But I was very grateful for this healing journey, first of all. And then a lot of coincidences happened. And the pandemic hit. About a year in the pandemic, my friends started getting very distressed. I remember one of them was working for a big corporate, and they were telling them, you know, the employees, well, you can use Calm and Headspace and meditate. And it's great, meditation helps, but it doesn't help you heal. I mean, and rewire the brain, except if you can meditate for hours every morning. I mean, and my friend was like, I hate meditating, you know, I hate sitting down. And she was like, find me something. And I was still thinking about this EMDR that had really helped me. I started reading a lot of neuroscience. I was reading a lot about sleep as well at the time, because the therapy that helped me, called EMDR, therapists would be moving their fingers in front of your eyes, and it reminded me of REM sleep, where your eyes move. And so I started reading a lot about sleep. And sleep is not only beneficial for the body, but it's great for the brain. When we dream, you know, for a very long time, people used to think, well, dreams are just a dream. It's a loss of time. I don't believe anything is a loss of time in the body. The body is efficient. If it was a loss of time, we wouldn't do it. And so during dream, we take experiences of the day, we kind of, the brain chews on it and just think about it, and then discards the pain, and then keeps the learning and integrates it in the brain. So we wake up refreshed and more resilient. And so I started putting all those pieces together. And I was like, I was still thinking, you know, midway through the pandemic, after a layoff from a company that went bust, I was like, I'm going to find another big job, and I'm going to read all of this during the weekend and start designing something. And then I met an engineer who was like, I have some free time. If you design me something, I'll develop it for you. I was like, oh my God. So I said, okay, pause. I got all the books and a lot of stuff. And then I designed a very simple prototype of the app. He coded it. And I was like, okay, I need some feedback on this. So I searched, you know, because at first I was very focused on post-traumatic stress disorder. And so I was like, okay, who are the PTSD experts in the world? Professor Yuval Nerya at Columbia, which is good because I had a Columbia connection, is an expert, has been working on this for like 30 or 40 years. So I emailed him, I said, can you get on the call? And he was like, yeah, sure. I was like, oh my God. In his busy schedule. So he got on a call, he tested the app. He was like, you know, it's still very simple. You have work to do, but there is definitely a need. And I asked him to come on board as an advisor. He came on board as an advisor. More people came on board as advisors, and I incorporated the business. A pilot came about, got a lot of feedback, and then it grew. It was, you know, they were hard times, but I do believe I had, you know, the universe on my back, you know, kind of helping me and opening doors, you know. Yeah.
Okay. So now you have all the right players, all the right people. Every time you're like, sure, I'll come, we'll work on it. But then how long did it take until the app went live from that start?
So I took the plunge in August of, okay, so now I'm like August of 2021, and the app was launched in November 2022. So it took about, 15 months.
And you had probably the greatest minds working on it with you. I mean, it
Yeah,
sounds
and
like
I one of the advisors is extremely spiritual, and she said it's an app of divine inspiration. And a lot of ideas came, from,
yeah,
the
yeah.
the universe, Yeah.
Okay. So I want to go more into the app. Who is it for? Because when we were going through it and the people that do see therapists, I got a number of questions. Question number 5, top 5 is this in addition to your therapy or instead or either or?
So we position it as a first step before therapy or a supplement to therapy. So it's both.
Okay.
It's people who don't have access to therapy, who don't want to talk to a therapist because some people are still not willing to talk to a therapist, or people who are in therapy and need something in between sessions.
Okay. And is the app, because I haven't experienced with it, because like I said, usually I'll do a deep dive, but this was overnight that we met, but I'm fascinated. Is it something you use once a week, daily, monthly? Tell us a little bit more about it.
So you can use it anytime you need it. The app is a companion to transform distress and anxiety, but also to grow more self-aware about what are your triggers. So you can use it anytime you need. And we've seen, people who use it on a daily basis as a maintenance. People who use it when a crisis comes will use it multiple times a day, for a few days. And then after it tapes her off, and then the week after something comes back, So one example is grief, for example. Grief is extremely difficult a lot of things are difficult to deal with, but grief, I think, is a very personal thing. You don't necessarily want to talk about, like when you've lost a partner, you want to talk about it with a therapist, but sometimes it's just very personal, actually. And you walk in your apartment, you see a photo that reminds you of something, then you can use the app, and then you move on. And then the day after you talk to a neighbor and then something comes back and it triggers you, then you can use the app. So it's there whenever you need it.
And so are there different times, or is, each session a certain amount of time?
So the way we design the app, and it's going to evolve because this is just the first version and I have so many more ideas. But right now it's designed with 5 main sessions. The first one is what we call the sanctuary. It lasts only about 3 minutes. You pick a place that brings you feelings of joy. So we put a lot of nature scenery. For me, it's the ocean. And then, so you pick this place and then you follow this slow moving light, and you have specific binaural beats. So let me just pause here. Binaural beats are sounds at a slightly different frequency on the left and right ear. And your brain can't detect the difference, but it will calculate it, And so your neurons work on electrical stimulation. Your neurons will align with this frequency difference. And so you can tune the brain on a frequency that relaxes it. So you create this sanctuary, which is a place you can return to anytime. And we've seen people using it before they meditate so that they relax, We've seen people using it every time they get triggered, like before a meeting, you're really stressed up. You're like, hey, let me just take 3 minutes to calm down, recenter, be happy. And so this is the first session. And then you have 4 sessions that walk you through the process of transformation. Those sessions last about, 13 minutes. And so you're guided by a voice. There is absolutely no writing, because I think writing is a very, rational kind of process. And we don't want people to have to overthink anything. So you're guided by what I think is a really nice voice. to think about the traumatic experience or what is bothering you. It could be, for example, an argument with your boss, right? Or an argument with your children. And then you assess, you think about where is the emotion in your body, what are the emotions you're feeling, and you follow a slightly faster moving light with different binaural beats. You don't need to talk, you just observe. And then what happens is, at the center of the brain, we have an organ called the amygdala. The amygdala is the fear center. So when we get afraid of something, so when you remember, for example, a car accident or something, the amygdala goes in hyperdrive and it's like, fear, fear, fear. And then your body is like, got to focus. But if it happens too often, it hijacks you, right? And so this light, when it moves, Professor Huberman at Stanford published a paper in Nature 5 years ago. When you move your eyes left and right, it tones down the activation of the amygdala fear center. So you don't feel panicked anymore. And so you're able to think about what has been bothering you, and the brain starts to process it. And so you follow this moving light for 1 minute. You pause, you take a deep breath, and then you observe what comes to mind. And very often, a related memory will come. And it could be another argument. Very often we get triggered in the present by something which reminds us of something that happened in the past that is very related. So very often we remember, I had an argument with a boss 5 years ago and I never process it. And then interestingly, so people go through 7 cycles and there are different music, different, guidelines. And eventually, I think it's kind of magical. The brain eventually processes it and kind of closes the cycle. Very often around the cycle, in the middle, the brain goes on a tangent and people are like, why am I remembering this? But it's exactly when you journal, right? Very often you go on a tangent and you're like, what's happening here? And at the end, it's like, it loops back to the first topic and then it gets resolved. Then that's where I think the brain is just beautiful. And I tell people, I said, when you go to bed at night and you dream, you don't wake up in the middle of the night and think, what am I going to dream about right now? What is it that I should process today? The mind just picks something and processes it, right? And this is what I want to create with the app, is give power back to the people to let their mind self-process and self-heal. And people ask me, am I thinking about the right thing? Whatever your mind brings up is the right thing. It's not a competition. There is no right or wrong answer. Whatever comes to mind is what your mind wants you to look at.
I freaking love this. I mean, I cannot wait to try it out, because it's everything. Like, I have clients, so I'm a mental and physical fitness coach. So I send people, if they need to, the therapist, like you said, I'm entry level, or a psychiatrist. But this would be such a magnificent tool, because I was just telling my client, he's only 19, and he's like, oh my God, it's amazing what I thought the brain was capable of doing. And now what I know, I was able to reset and do. Like, I'm just scratching the surface of thinking, well, this is just my brain and this is how it works. And it's not true. And it sounds like, to me, I mean, from the little that you told me, and you're just scratching the surface of what the power that people have within themselves.
And the brain is plastic, I mean, until a couple of decades ago, scientists were still thinking your neurons don't rejuvenate and you're born with a certain number of neurons and then they die. And now they realize, no, neurons grow and keep on growing, and the brain is extremely plastic. A little side story, they've shown that people who have like, a brain accident, and for example, the part of the brain that is used for hearing actually is just dead. Well, the brain will take another part that is used for eyesight and retrain it for hearing. Actually, it's crazy. So the brain is extremely plastic. We can learn a lot of things. We can rewire the brain, and there is one part of the app that is it's not only releasing the stress, it's also rewiring your brain. So when
Yeah.
something happens to you, very often, we blame ourselves and, you're laid off, right? You're like, "Oh, I'm a loser. I should have seen it coming. I should have worked harder,
Yeah.
This doesn't help you, right? Those beliefs are disempowering. They bring you down. And
Yeah.
so it's about rewiring your brain and coming out and saying, maybe it was time to go, right? There was an economic downturn. It's not my fault. It just happened, right? And
Yeah.
so it's really this rewiring of the brain, and the belief is also very, very important.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, to me, I'm all about prevention and teaching techniques before it does get too severe. And this sounds like an amazing tool for that, and giving, like you said, letting people know how powerful they truly are, and that they have it within them. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Okay, so you mentioned here, and you talked a little bit about the importance of sleep. Well, I can tell you, when people fill out their apps, like they're coming online, it used to be like, what's the number one thing? Okay, I know it's all my mental for losing weight. And so I finally want to deal with the mental for losing weight. You know what it is now? The number one thing people want? Sleep. They want. I was at an event 2 weeks ago, and the guy ran over like practically 50 people. Say, did I hear you say something that you can help people sleep better? So it's the number one thing that people are having issues with, and we know it's important. Is the app something that will help people sleep better?
Yes. And so for multiple reasons, I think, I'm not a sleep expert, but I think exercise, food, all of this affects sleep. But we live in a society where we are hyperstimulated, right? It's when you, and an answer about the app, but when you think at the brain and evolution, the brain doesn't evolve that fast. Sure, we are really smart and we can send people to the moon, but at the same time, a few generations ago, a few brain cycles earlier, we didn't have internet, we didn't even have cell phones. So the brain is hyperstimulated, and at the end of the day, it takes time for us to unwind and all of this. So this is one. The other thing is, we live, I believe, in a more competitive world, right? It's like you need to perform. You're always, asked to be on emails and calls and all of this. For teenagers, it's like it's really difficult and stressful, to get into college. So it's hard for the brain, I think, to absorb all of this and unwind. So just using, for example, the Sanctuary will help. We also put a sleep session with a slow moving light and delta binaural beats, which are the binaural beats under which the brain is when we sleep. And some people at first ask, why do you have a sleep session in a mental health app? And I need to explain that a little bit more. It's because sleep is really important for mental health.
No, I totally get it. I totally get it. This young lady is saying like, okay, so she probably shouldn't watch horror movies right before bed, or this, like, because some people do that. They watch these most disturbing, series, and then they wonder why they can't sleep. Like, at least watch a comedy or something.
I know, and people say right now, they used to say don't watch TV before you go to bed because of the light and everything, but now they are saying it's not so much not watching TV, it's what you watch on TV. If you watch a little sitcom that you've watched before that is fun, it's okay, it winds you down and you're going to sleep well. But a horror movie or even a thriller, when you're like, why did they do it? Who really killed the person? And then during the night, you're like analyzing the whole thing.
Yeah, and a lot of the really popular, they're really serious dramas, and there is a lot of suspense and murders. Okay, but I watch like Frankie and Grace or Seinfeld, even, I don't care, something silly right before I'm going to my downtime, and it works like a charm. Okay, so I want to get this in before we go, because you touched a little bit about spending time in silence, and for you, that's not meditation, it's journaling. I didn't prompt that. So let's go into that, because a lot of the people that were writing into me were saying they're not big meditators. They can't sit there for 45 minutes to an hour, which of course I don't think they need to, but they do write. And is that considered the same thing as being in silence, like just spending time with yourself and listening to your thoughts?
So I'm not the, the meditation teacher. So, this is just my opinion, but I believe writing can work. And I remember this memoir writer, and now I'm gonna, oh, damn. And she studied Zen Buddhism for like a decade. And I remember, and she's a writer as well. And at some point, a Zen teacher who told her, why don't you make writing your practice? And she was like, can I? And he was like, yes, if you're committed to it and you do it every day, it can become your practice. And I think this is what is important is the attitude you take to it, right? If you say, well, I'm going to write when I feel like it.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, but if you say every morning, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to write for 15 minutes, tired, not tired, emotional, not emotional, I'm going to do it. Then it can become a mindfulness practice. And one thing I did as well is a few years ago, I promised myself, I said, I will write whatever comes. Ashamed, guilty, painful, I will write it. And even if I told myself nobody would ever read my journals, it's still hard, right? To write about something that you're ashamed of. But I was like,
yeah,
you make a commitment to this, you're going to do it. And I think this is something that it was a shifting point for me as well for this is you're going to do it and you're going to do it for at least a certain amount of time. You're going to do it every day. And, sometime I wake up, I'm late, I have a call, I do the call, but then I journal afterwards. It's okay. Yeah.
And I agree with you. I'm not a meditation coach either. And I think meditation is phenomenal, but I believe there's more than one way to spend time with yourself and in silence, whether it's out taking walks, biking in nature, it's just quieting so that you can listen to what's going on. All right, we got to get into it. I could talk to you forever, and I have so many questions I want to ask you, but it's going to have to be another time. So a little bit more about you. What's your daily routine? Like, what do you do? Like, give us you wake up in the morning. Do you have a practice? Do you have a practice at night? What do you do, Marie?
I wake up. It depends, weekdays, non-weekdays. Weekdays is, I stay a little bit in bed and I kind of watch my thoughts. And I usually check email and messages because I have people all over the world I work with. So I'm like, I want to catch them, before they go to sleep in India. I do this during the week, but during the weekend, I don't do this. And then, wash my face, get some coffee, and then I journal. And I journal for at least 15 minutes. And during the weekend it's a treat for me. I let myself journal as much as I want. So during the holiday, because everything slowed down, I realized there were a lot of stuff I wanted to reflect on. And some days I wrote for an hour, actually. And don't check news, don't do any of this. And then if it's a weekdays, then okay, I'm like, I've done my journaling, I'm recentered. I write my goals for the day. I still do it on, pencil, my favorite white pencil, and sheets of paper. I mean, everything is digitized in my life. I'm all on my iPhone and my laptop, but I literally write my goals. And I'm a little bit of a nerd. I have the goals for the business and all the brained up little thing I need to do at the end of the day. And then I start my day. I have calls or right now, what I try to do is get a couple of urgent calls, and then I'm getting ready to write some grants and I need some downtown. So then I'm like, okay, switch off the email, put the phone back in the kitchen. Check it, work. And then, so right now I can't really swim because it's rainy and cold, but middle of the afternoon, I start being a little bit brain dead. So I go for a walk and I'm lucky I have trails. So I go on the trail. Sometimes I take an audiobook with me, sometimes I don't. And then because it's been really busy with the business, I have dinner and then I get back to work in the evening. So I'm a little bit of a nerd, and, but overall, this is this. And then my Friday evening, I always watch a movie. It's kind of, I love movies, I love stories. And then during the weekend I usually switch off from calls as much. I don't usually do any
good.
business work calls during the weekend because I'm both an introverted and extroverted, so I get very stimulated and I can chit chat with people. I love this, but at the end of the day, I also need some time alone. So during the weekend, I'm like, except urgency, I don't do any business call whatsoever.
So wait a minute, let's circle back in your swimming. So you don't swim inside, you swim outside.
Yes, I'm a very big swimmer. I grew up in Brittany by the ocean, and I'm a Pisces as well. So I don't know, I have a love for water. And so I grew up, even before I learned how to swim in school, I would go in, my dad would drive me to the beach and I would play in the water. My cousins made fun of me. I didn't know how to swim. And when I was living in Dubai, I launched a business. It was very, very busy. But every day at the end of the day, I would go to the ocean and then swim for 1 hour in the ocean. That helped me maintain my sanity. So this is a kind of meditation as well. No cell phone, nothing at all.
Yeah. So that's why you're moving to Miami, so you can swim in the ocean more.
It's my treat.
I mean, like, it's adventurous.
And I'm so, it's like, I'm so refreshed after this. I have so much more energy. I'm clearer. And some people say being in salty water is actually very purifying. So yeah, swimming for me it's one of the loves of my life.
Okay, so you don't get scared of the waves, like the big waves or anything? No. Okay.
The trick is, and I used to live in Hawaii for a little while, is, the waves crash and you go past the waves where it's calmer and then you swim down there and then so you have to come back, but it's okay. Yeah.
All right, so I was trying to keep track, but I lost track. How many different places have you lived in your lifetime? Do you know?
Yeah, so
you do?
I grew up in France. I lived in Singapore. From Singapore, I moved to Shanghai. I worked in Shanghai for a few years. G moved me to San Diego. I was there for 3 years. G moved me to Boston. I was there for 4 years. And then after the burnout, I went on a trip. So I traveled all over sub-Saharan Africa. So that was like moving. I never really settled. And then an opportunity. Then I lived on Maui for a while to do some writing. And then I was in Dubai for 3 years. And then I came back. I was in New York for a couple of months. And then the last business relocated me here to California.
Okay, so I'm going to go with top 10. I mean, I'm sure in Africa there was bunches, but do you have a favorite?
I love Maui. I think Maui is just beautiful. It's a little bit difficult to work in Maui, right? Everybody is like retired or, on vacation, and you're so far away from time zones. But for me, it's the definition of paradise, right? It's really safe and the nature is just luxuriant. It's like, it's lush, right? It's warm, it's bright, there are flowers, and it's spiritual as well. And then there's the energy of the volcano as well. And so I think Maui is just beautiful.
So I'm seeing all the places you've lived and thinking that you're the kind of person that could up and move anywhere. And I'm wondering, of all these places, not that I don't like Miami, why you chose Miami to go to.
It may sound strange, but I can't fully explain. So I can give you a lot of rational reason, right? I want to be on East Coast time. I want to be able to swim. It's good for taxes. I have friends there. But it's also a gut feeling that I need to be there as well for the next step of my life.
All right. No, I get that. All right. Well, this has been such a blessing. It's such a nice surprise. I love when things happen like this that aren't planned and are last minute. But before we go, my Let's Keep It Real people need to know how they can find you and or your app. Like, where can they go? Because I know they're all going to want to use it.
So we're going to put the links, but best place is to look at the website. So www.Akesa Health, Akesa lesaichellehealth.com. And there you can find everything, LinkedIn page, where to download the app. It's only on the App Store. Android people, please wait. It's coming soon. And you can email me directly. So I'm on social media. I'm on Twitter a little bit. I'm on Facebook a little bit, but I'm not super fast down there. If people want to reach out, they can email me directly. It's Marie@akesahealth.com, or at the bottom of the website, you can see the hello@akesahealth.com as well. Yeah. The address is there. And I'm on LinkedIn a lot more often than any other social media.
So my Pixel 6 phone, it's not ready for it yet.
I had to make a decision, with budget and engineering time, and we're like, let's launch on the App Store, get some feedback, make sure it's taking off. And then the team is getting started very soon on Android. It's coming, it's coming.
My whole family, they all have Apple phones. They even bought me an Apple phone. I have an Apple computer. So
I don't have stocks in Apple,
No, I get it. I get it. All right. Anything, Marie, we didn't get in that you want to tell the people? Now's the time.
I think we talked about it a little bit, but so first of all, I'm grateful for all the questions that people send. So I guess two things. One is there is light at the end of the tunnel. And I want to say that again, there is light at the end of the tunnel. So I'm just going to take a couple of minutes. I reread the Chinese classic, the Tao Te Ching with the yin and the yang. And
yeah.
So, and they said, the darker it gets, the closer you are to brightness. Because in the yin and the yang, when it goes all white, you have a little dot of black, and then you move to the cycle. And it's the same with the moons and everything, and the sun setting and rising. We live in circles and in cycles. And sometimes the cycle is short, sometimes it is long, but it's always a cycle. So the darker it gets, the closer you are to getting to the brightness. And then the second thing that comes to mind now is, I am not trained as a therapist. I am trained as a coach. I'm trained as an energy healer. But if people want to bounce ideas, or even if they have questions or anything, my email is there. I'm very focused on Akesa right now, but I do allocate some time if people need help with anything. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And let's keep it real, people. Come on. You want to share this, rate this, and like it. It really does help. We really do appreciate it. Spread the word. I don't think there's anybody who couldn't benefit from this. Anyone. We all can benefit. And I don't know of anyone, of any human being, that wouldn't benefit from this app. I really don't.
I know, lucky the one who is not stressed right now, right?
Yeah. I just can't. I'm just saying this. I mean, I just can't even imagine. Until next time, you know what I'm going to say. Toodles.
Thank you.